If Leatherface walked into a therapy session, would we be looking at a monster or someone shaped entirely by the environment he grew up in? Today's guest might be the only person who can help answer that question because he actually survived an encounter with Leatherface. But here's the real question. Is Leatherface actually a villain or a victim? Alan, what do you think?
Victim. Being childlike, and growing up mentally challenged, he did the only thing he knew how to do, and that was to defend his house and his folks. That's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
Welcome to Scream Therapy, where horror meets healing. I'm your host, Jayla, and this is Villains in Therapy, the show where we take horror's most iconic villains and ask what would happen if they went to therapy. Disclaimer, this episode explores psychological themes for discussion and entertainment purposes only. We are not providing clinical diagnosis. So for those who don't know, this is Alan Danziger, my special guest co-host, and also Jerry from the 1974 Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Alan, what was your first impression of Leatherface? Like when you looked at the script and read about him?
I was fascinated, and almost mesmerized by it. I'm trying to think. The script, I think, was maybe 100 pages. But it read so quickly.
Yeah.
And I really didn't fully grasp as to what he would look like. And as you know, there are two different masks in the movie. There's the killing mask, and then there's the pretty woman mask.
Yes.
So as we get into how therapy would progress, I've got some thoughts on that. He's 6'7".
6'7".
I'm a munchkin. So I totally freaked.
Obviously, when you saw him, you probably thought, okay, I don't know, were you thinking about the psychological side of things? Because you were already working in a mental health field, correct? When you got this opportunity.
Yeah.
So were you thinking about him like, okay, is he a product of his environment? Or were you just thinking, gosh, this is a really scary villain?
At the moment, I just wanted to get the heck out of there. You know what I mean? My life's in danger, But as I think even though Vira mentioned, I take the hit, but you don't see my body.
Yeah.
And so why I say there's definitely some psychological stuff. After I get whacked, he goes to the window and he's hitting his head. He's really upset.
Right.
And that's where I said, well, maybe there's some redeeming qualities
about
him.
What I mean? Yeah.
And then perhaps he saw what he did and he rescues me. As I mentioned, we end up living in my van down by the river.
Yes.
So that's a theme I'd like to carry on.
Do you think Jerry survived?
Yeah. I think there's a movement, that people say, you don't see his body. I think even though Vira mentioned that, there are other people that have mentioned that. So there may be a chance for me to come back.
Right.
I won't be the same. I'll have some brain issues. I'll have to, relearn how to walk and how to talk, but I won't be the first one.
What do you think makes Leatherface such a terrifying character?
He's so huge. He's got the apron. He's got the killing machine of the chainsaw.
Yes.
But I think the question you might have asked, well, how would you treat him? If he came in as a patient.
Right.
My first thought would be, is he coming in wearing the killing mask, or is he coming in wearing the pretty woman mask?
Right.
If he's wearing the pretty woman, I quietly would put on Roy Orbison's music of Pretty Woman and try and set us a more calming situation. And then I would get into it because I know I've read stuff. There's been sequels. There's obviously there's childhood abuse. There's abandonment. He's got a pretty crazy family.
Correct.
Jim Seadow couldn't have been any more appropriately cast as the cook. You know what I mean? And
yes.
And then they're sitting around. You remember sitting around that table? That's terrifying with my girlfriend Sally.
Yeah.
Tied to the chair. And
yes.
I think one of the lines he says, we don't really like killing, but there's just some things you got to do. Doesn't mean you got to like it, but you got to do it.
Oh, yes.
So what does that tell you? You
I
know,
remember for me personally, I saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the 1974, the original, as a kid. I think I was probably, if I had to, maybe middle school age, so preteen. Watched it with my mom and my little sister, and my mom was telling us how this was like the most terrifying movie she had ever seen. And they had kind of seen it accidentally because they had gone to the drive-in theater and they'd gone to see a certain movie, but she was telling me that they would always play another movie first. And so they're there early to get good parking or whatever. And this movie comes on and they have no idea what they're about to watch. And it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And she said it just had us paralyzed, in fear. And so when we watched it with her, at that point, I had only seen scary movies where the monster was either supernatural,
yeah,
in
yeah.
some way, not a human being
And I
wearing
think you know
people.
why this is so scary when people see it because it's believable. You
Yes.
know, it's the summer, it's hot, you see the sweat. And I think back, and I might have mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned that at the last one. They went to see it in a porno theater.
Oh, yeah.
And the scene where I get ready to go into the house, my mother gets up and in her native language, which was virtually no language, she started screaming for me not to go in there. And then the usher almost escorted them out of the theater. And then when they got home, they called me, just to verify that I was still alive. So
Wow.
that's how believable it was back
That
then.
had to be pretty crazy for them to see that. Yeah. I mean, it was
Yeah,
it
I
was a
mean,
movie that really shocked a lot of people. And the 70s was pre, rating system. We didn't have the rating system yet. In fact, I think the 70s is kind of what prompted rating systems to come along in the 80s
yeah,
because
yeah.
horror was a
I
little
think,
out of
I
control.
mean, the two movies that I was in, Eggshells and that, I mean, they had no idea
Yeah.
what to make of it.
What to make of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to do something fun now, Alan. We are going to take Leatherface to therapy. Just like we did with Jason Voorhees, we're going to do that with Leatherface. Leatherface walks into therapy. What behaviors do you think stand out about him right away as he walks into therapy?
Well, I mean, like I say, depending on the mask. If
Okay.
he's wearing the killing mask, I'm in trouble. Again, I'm going to alert 911. I'm going to try and put some distance. If he's got the pretty woman mask, I'm almost home free. It's going to be a more relaxed atmosphere. I'll have Roy Orbison on the cassette or whatever playing Pretty Woman, and then we'll just get into it. What brings you here? What brings you here to today? And we'll get into it. He'll go into it. He's been abused. He's been harangued. He gets no respect, as Rodney Dangerfield,
Right.
would say. And, there's abandonment issues. There's all kinds of issues.
Okay.
And I have some insight in that, Gunnar Hansen, who played Leatherface and is
Yes.
arguably the best one, and contrary to the character, this was just a very bright, very funny, and a wonderful guy. And although I hated him during the movie, but after it was over, after I got whacked, we actually became, very, very good friends. And as I mentioned, he stayed with me this summer before he moved to Maine.
Oh. What kind of environment do you think shapes someone like Leatherface?
It's probably a terrible environment. Arguing, physical violence, mental violence. Constantly probably putting him down. I mean, he was a big guy back in the day. To paraphrase some of the vernacular, we would call him a schlub. An oaf, adult. That kind of those kind of phrases. So he's a big lumbering dude. So to speak, and so those kind of people get picked on.
Right.
And again, and if he's not very bright, if he has trouble, there could be some language problems, as I mentioned, could be some dyslexia, other things going on, and obviously that plays in has an effect. It's kind of like he was like a Lenny character in Of Mice and Men, big guy,
Right. That's a good
but
comparison. Yeah. Do you think that Leatherface is acting from fear or control or survival or a mix of those things?
probably a little bit of a combination, definitely from fear, and you see when the cook comes in and remember that line is, look what your brother did to the door,
Yes.
and then he starts like he's ready to beat him, and and he's making these sounds. I mean, he obviously couldn't talk, wasn't able to speak, even though he's a grown person. So you got linguistic problems,
Right.
and he's making these almost like animal sounds,
Right.
guttural sounds.
So do you think Leatherface probably isn't able to speak normally? Like that's why that's all you hear from him?
Probably,
Yeah.
you know. I don't know
Um,
if that's been explored or if they've done any,
do you,
got him into a speech therapy class. I don't think that was
Bruh.
open to him back then.
do you think that some sort of intervention could have changed things for him when he was younger?
Oh yeah, but it would have to have been, very early on. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? I think we see nowadays, with the Head Start program, you got to start real early. You have a chance, but
Mhm.
once it's a grown person or a teen, it's a lot harder.
Do you think that would have involved taking him out of that family environment?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I don't think it would have worked. Even, I mean, you look at the cook, then you got the hitchhiker. That's a piece of work. The guy, he's got his own problems with that port wine stain on on his face, and he had other things, growths on his that actually were raisins. But we'll let that go. But they all look so realistic, and the hitchhiker was also quite a character.
Yes.
And then you
Yes.
got Grandpa's 150, you know, and and he was portrayed by a terrific guy, John Dugan.
Yes.
And John
I met John.
was, I think he was like 20, just barely 21. Now I kid him and say he doesn't need the makeup anymore. You know what I
Ah,
mean?
that's great.
So, but he's terrific. When I'm doing these Comic Cons, they come over and say, "This is my son. He's 6, and
Yeah.
he's seen this movie." And I said, I find that quite troubling, you know. But
You're like, you're too young for this.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if I mentioned it when the movie came out. I mean, I just went to see the coming attractions, and I just saw myself on the screen, and I ran out of the theater. And then stupidly, I took my son, who was like 5, just to see his dad in the coming attraction. And that's
Right.
over 50 years ago. He's still in weekly therapy,
Ah.
So what are you going to do?
If you're listening or watching, he's totally kidding about that.
Just
So
kidding, folks. Just kidding.
so I mean, obviously, it really does look like within Leatherface's family dynamic, there is a history of mental health issues, unaddressed
Oh,
mental health
complete.
issues. Yeah,
Yeah, completely unaddressed. Yeah,
he's just such a victim of that, I
completely,
think. Yeah.
completely. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, in comes these people coming into his house. He calling out, and without knowing anything back then we're talking about what the 70s, and
Yeah.
so he's left alone. He's frightened, and he just lashes out.
Yeah. I remember as a kid, sort of at one point feeling sorry for his character, even though he was terrifying to me,
Right.
and became for me the scariest villain in all horror for many many years. Like that was
And
the
I think there's that duality in that in some respects you kind of feel sorry for him.
yes,
And that makes it even worse.
when the dad is kind of like hitting him and yelling at him, and they're just
Right.
kind of ordering
Right.
him around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you start to see this picture of how he was formed. So we got a fun little segment we're going to do now. It's called Masked or Made. So, first question, what do you think the mask symbolize?
The pretty woman, more symbolize a more female, a feminine part of him, as opposed to the killing match, which I guess he literally takes the skin off the corpses. Once he kills them, then he takes the skin off of them and turns it into a mask. It's kind of pretty clever in some ways, but a little bit out there.
Do you think he has an unstable identity?
I unstable. He has no identity. I
Yes,
guess
no,
he's
right.
probably, this guy's got no identity. He's looking for something.
Right.
And maybe that's it. He puts on other people's, persona,
Faces.
so to speak.
Yeah,
What's a persona? It's a mask.
right.
And maybe wants to be human, wants to be a regular guy.
Right.
But
That's so
unfortunately, not.
sad. Alan, do you think that masks are emotional protection?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I think a lot of people. I mean, some people put on a mask in terms of how they behave,
Mhm.
and some people put on a mask. It's a chance for people to be somebody else, and put their own life or their own problems and put it aside.
Do you think in some way we all wear masks?
I think it's in some ways probably we do. I mean, normally we try to put our best foot forward or our best face forward, face
Correct.
ahead. We want people to see the best of us, unless you're a sociopath or a psychopath,
Right.
then
Yeah.
we won't go into that. That's a whole other.
Why do you think the audience feels sympathy? Like we were just discussing, why do you think, like me as a kid, was moved to feel a little bit of sympathy for Leatherface?
Well, as you see, in the movie, he's put upon, he's made fun of. The cook comes in, he's so, look what your brother did to the door. Then he's wanting to, and he does start beating him. Like I said, here's this big oaf of a guy, and he doesn't have the mental capacity, to understand, to take this all in and be able to deal with it. He can't even speak.
Do you think his mental development is that of like a child in a lot of ways?
Yeah, maybe, gosh, I don't know. I would maybe a 3 or 4 year old.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
severely arrested, severely stunted. Yeah,
What do you think fans misunderstand the most about Leatherface?
he's not just a killing machine. You know what I mean? But he's a guy that, in some ways, he was put upon. He was
Mhm.
left alone, probably left alone a lot. All of a sudden, a group of people, of young people, start invading his space,
Right.
and he doesn't know how to handle it. He doesn't have the language. He doesn't have the mental acuity to deal
Right.
with it. And I think there's a part of the audience that identifies that.
Yeah.
This guy is in the right. It's a home invasion. You know what
Right.
I mean?
Yeah.
Probably
Yeah.
would get off. He'd have to go. He'd have to go to one of those NCIS or Law and Order, and have them defend him, and probably would get off. We bring back Jerry Orbach, to defend him.
Okay, so was Leatherface born a monster or shaped by his environment?
Oh, I think as this whole episode, I think it was definitely shaped by his environment. And if he had the best of help or whatnot, then perhaps he could have made it possibly, in some kind of a sheltered workshop or something like that. But he's still loose.
For the audience, we want to know what you think. Was Leatherface a monster or made by his environment? Let us know what you think. Leave it in the comments. And if you are struggling, you are never alone. Reach out to someone you trust. In the US, you can call or text 988 for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. And Alan, any advice to anyone who might be struggling right now?
Don't be ashamed. Talk to your parents. If your parents can't help you, maybe a good friend can help you, or a teacher, or a guidance counselor, or if you go to a church. But don't hold it in, because it's going to come out. It's going to come out often in terrible ways.
Exactly.
So there's nothing wrong with it. In fact, it's healthy to talk about it. Hey, I've been in therapy myself.
Same.
So
Many years
look
of
at what it's done for me.
it. Many years of it. Maybe we'll do an
Maybe
episode
not
talking
so
about what
easily
we've learned
yeah.
from therapy. Alan, thank you for joining us again today. This has been Villains in Therapy on Scream Therapy TV, where horror meets healing.